Yay. Well, I cannot believe that it is August and it's time for a jam that several months ago we were like, oh, yes, we absolutely have to talk about this. And then as we were getting ready for this month, we're like, oh, yeah, what was it that we wanted to say about vulnerability? And as I sat down and started to do some brainstorming, it was like, oh my gosh, we could talk for weeks about vulnerability because it's one of those topics that just touches everything that we do in our lives in some way, shape, or form. And so I am so excited that we get to devote about 45 minutes today to something that is important to our personal lives, something important to our professional lives, our family relationships, the communities that we work in, all of those things. So it came through this just loud and clear burst when we were planning at the beginning of the year. Yeah, we need to talk about vulnerability. And I guess even today in our coaching sessions, that's a continuous theme. So I think our timing is perfect. And to kind of launch, how we're going to approach vulnerability today, I think it's really important to frame it in the idea that vulnerability is always going to start with you. Right? Vulnerability isn't just about those relationships. And that's a lot of the time when we start thinking about vulnerability, right? Is, okay, oh, I have to tell somebody something that maybe they don't want to hear, or I'm going to get really bold and put my brand out there and open myself up for feedback, and it might not be great. It's always usually, okay, I've got this outer thing that I'm going to be doing. But it's really important as we launch into this conversation to just recognize that vulnerability is only going to be allowed if you internally let it, if you internally can accept all of the beautiful badassery that you bring to the table and that you were born with, right? In our coaching conversations, we talk about the essence of you, right? Those strengths, those passions, those talents, those things that just totally light you up. And that then when you are in alignment with those things, you just become like a radiant light, right? And you become magnetic to all the people around you. It's the same exact thing with vulnerability. Right? And vulnerability can happen when you know who you are, right? You've got those strengths and those passions. You're like, this is right. I am amazing. I am worthy of having amazing ideas. I am worthy of going and making an impact that's huge, right? When you own that piece of who you are, then vulnerability can just flow everywhere. So it was really important as Cami and I were talking, like, we've got to start here. So Cami, what would you say about the fact that vulnerability starts inside? What does that mean to you?
Well, when I was sitting down and I was thinking about this, it really occurred to me that, we can look at vulnerability and take it right to the outside world really easily. And we miss a step when we do that. We miss this really, really important step of getting truthful and honest with ourselves first. And until we really own our truth and our honesty with ourselves, we can't really truly be vulnerable with others because we're not standing on a ground that is solid. We're playing in this space that's pretty wavery out there. And and I think that it's an opportunity for us to learn and to grow and to evolve as human beings. And what we put into the world is if we really go deep into our own truth to start with. So that's where we're going to start, right?
Woo-hoo.
So we're going to start with taking out a sheet of paper. And so take out a sheet of paper and turn it into a landscape mode. So you're going to turn it to look like that. And on that sheet of paper, you are going to draw 4 columns. So it's going to look, 4 columns are going to look like that. And as you get those 4 columns drawn, I want you to start thinking about the first column. You're going to talk about change. You're going to say, what are the things that you would love to change in your life? Perhaps it's a relationship with a spouse, with a child, with your best friend, with a coworker. Perhaps it's a relationship with yourself. Perhaps you'd like your work life or your business to change? More money, more passion for more passion for what you're doing, or just maybe it's just more excitement in your life in general. Are you seeking more adventure, more peace, more quiet and calm, more health, better health, more laughter? What are the things that you would really love to have changed in your life? So jot that down in your first column and just take a moment and get those written down. And then when I looked at mine, I was looking at brand, how my brand is transforming, what's taking shape there. One of the things that I've been working on all year long is just creating a lot of sensual, sexual, juicy connection with my hubby in my life. That's why our jam session was what it was last month. And the other one is wellness and, taking care of myself from a healthy perspective. What were some of yours, Sarah, that you're working on?
I'm definitely working on relationships, and not only with my close personal relationships, like with my husband and those that really matter most, but also the relationships with my clients.
Yeah.
Right, I want to move to an even juicier level, and as I also considered the content that I'm putting out, like I know that I want to change the level of vulnerability that I'm sharing. When I'm making a video or I'm posting, a tweet or something like that, and really making sure that I'm not just sounding like everybody else, but I'm like sharing my message.
Yeah.
Because I think I can up-level that.
Yeah. Very good. So flip over on the clean side of your paper, and I want you to spend a moment just writing your big why. What's the reason you'd like things to change in your life? What would be different? How would you feel if you made these changes in your life? So just give yourself a little space to write down, what's your big why? Why do you want these things to happen? What's evolving? How is it going to be different? And really connecting to that big why. And I think that's a huge thing. It's like, we talk about, our business, our relationships changing with clients, or, our brands changing, that sort of thing. We need to know our why first. And
Right.
if we don't get that why, it kind of becomes hollow, and it also becomes not really clear what you're trying to do, right? I mean, and you see a lot of that out there. I mean, there's so much noise that's out there. I'm very tuned into a lot of noise that is out there right now, and unless people are really tuned into a solid why, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear just more noise in my life. So I think this is, whether it's our relationships, whether it's our, all the different pieces, it's like, how do we really create something that we stand up for, that we, oh, Angela, it makes me want to think of what we were just saying about putting what you stand for, that piece, that part of the essence of who we are and the purpose that we stand on. So just those sorts of things.
Absolutely. The other day I was pondering this question, that why, and somebody put it into some really cool context. I can't say the word, but it was consider the things that you want to have, consider the things that you want to be, and consider the things that you want to do, and how do those link together. And I was like, ooh, I like that kind of have, be, do model.
Yeah.
That being part is like that legacy, right? And that the having, what kind of things do I want to have? And that helps me make an impact, and doing, what are those big wild things that I'm going to totally accomplish? So that might be helpful as you ponder that question.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so we're talking about this vulnerability starts with us, right? We've talked about this, and it is an inside-out job, and it requires getting really real with ourselves and admitting the stories that we're not even owning in our internal conversations or our external conversations, right? It's like the things that we just don't really let surface up, rise up. And it's about knowing our own truth. So flip your paper back over to the column side, the 3-column side. And in the self, or in the second column, you're going to write self. And when you look at that, your vulnerability with yourself, what is the story or the belief that you are a little nervous to even share with yourself, to put out in the world, right? You put out in the world, it's more about what are you not even admitting to yourself or wanting to say out loud. And it's good if it makes you kind of like go, ooh, that feels a little edgy. That means you're kind of onto the right sort of thing, right? If it gives you this little this little jazz in your tummy, it's like, okay, you're probably onto the right sort of thing. And
Right.
if you can look at those 3 areas of your life that you want to change, and it might be a fear, it might be a desire, it might be sadness. It could be the imposter syndrome, right? It's like, I'm not good enough at, whatever. And you may have already acknowledged it to yourself, which is great. If that's, it's really good if you've already done that. But maybe you've just been afraid to even say it to yourself. And this is where it starts. And it creates this sense of stirred up emotion in you as you even start to write it down. You're probably onto something then. What are the stories that you might not even be admitting to yourself around these areas? So take a moment on that.
And if you're listening to this and you're like, I just don't even know where to begin, you might want to consider pondering what you judge in others. Because oftentimes what we judge in others is a really beautiful mirror back into what we judge in ourselves.
Yes.
Or consider maybe some of those comments that your inner critic tells you that just totally hit that trigger button and you're immediately like, ah!
Yeah.
That could be some gold there for you.
Yeah. So in mine, when I was looking through this and I was thinking about, the rebranding that I'm going through in my business, and some of the things that I had realized was I had quit trusting my intuition. That there was this space that I could, start to give away I'd say, no, that's the way to be successful. And I'd say, okay, I need to model that. And I'd start following all the shoulds of what I should be doing in my business. And there was an element there where I started to lose that authenticity of my voice. And then it shifted a lot in my business, right? So it's that sort of thing is knowing that, gosh, why did I let my own intuition go away? Why didn't I trust that? So that's one of my stories around one of the change areas that I'm looking at. How about you, Sarah?
I think one of my biggest ones that I'm working on right now is my money story, and that idea of that I'm valuable enough, I'm good enough to charge the wages that I charge. I was recently doing some billing for one of my corporate clients, and I have some people that support me, and I was looking at their bill and what they charge, and then I was looking at my bill and what I charged, and there was this immediate like, like why are you like not charging as much as you need to be charging? Like this person, is out there, boom, big, huge dollars, and you're good. You're really good. Why aren't you willing to claim that space too? And it goes back to that belief of worthiness. So that's one of my biggest vulnerabilities I'm working on right now. And whew, It's a tough one.
Yeah. So Angela, what showed up for you?
Well, I mean, certainly worthiness. And for me, it may be, we haven't really talked about this a lot, but just being scared.
Uh-huh.
And just being scared to put myself out there.
Yeah.
Because of just what's gone down so far.
Yeah. Yeah. So so you start to notice that, you start to feel that, and does it kind of get you a little bit like, oh gosh, do I even want to say this out loud?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, say the word scared, sure, because then that means you're not a fighter and you're not all that, but I know that I am.
And we all are, right? I mean, I think that's the
Right.
most important thing I want to say is like, oh my God, I so have been scared in the journey that I'm on. And I go, oh my God, do I go there? Do I admit that? There's strength in that. So
Yeah.
congratulations for sharing that.
For
Thank you.
sure.
I know you, I mean, you felt fear too, right, Sarah?
All the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Every day.
Put my big mouth open. I posted a video yesterday on Instagram, and I was like, "Is this even good? Like, I don't even know." It was like, this is crap. Like, just like the fear that somebody's gonna say, "Who the hell do you think you are?" Thinking like, here you are, some motivator. It's like, oh, you wrestle with that all the time. It's like,
Yeah.
ew.
Yeah. And we're going to, so, and speaking of that, we're going to talk about Brene Brown for just a moment. Brene Brown, when she got, and I love her story. And if you haven't watched her videos, if you haven't watched, just read her book, you have to watch Brene because, when she put out what she put out there as his academic, it's what changed her whole career. And she woke up just scared as hell, like, what the hell did I just do yesterday? What did I tell people? What are people going to think of me? And so that's where, when we really put ourselves out there in vulnerable states, it's where we make the most impactful shifts for ourselves and our own results, but it's also the place that we make the most impactful results in others. It's where the magic occurs. So there's just so much to really play in when you start to examine where we feel vulnerable with ourselves first. And then we can start to go and look at it outside of ourselves. So let's move to the third column and label this column vulnerability in relationship. So what are the vulnerable conversations you need to have to help move the needle on the things that you want to change in your life? And vulnerability also looks like it's courageous conversations. This is a big one. And it requires massive grit and grace to really be able to connect and have conversations that are a little bit scary with other people. And so pause for a moment and consider, is there a conversation that you know you need to have in your life right now? What relationship in your life needs more vulnerability? What, do you need to kind of open up the covers to some of these feelings and these thoughts in your life? Is there some truth you need to share with someone close that you've been holding inside? Do you need to shift something in a relationship? So just take a moment in that. Okay, does anyone want to, Sarah or Angela, do you want to share what comes up for you? People-wise?
I'll let Sarah go first.
Thanks for that. I think that, I always am trying to determine, how much do I be vulnerable? Because I can tend to be like an open book. It's like, okay, can I just, and so my mind is just thinking about, okay, so how much vulnerability is a good thing? And I question that a lot with relationships. Like, if I bare my heart too much, is that going to repel them, or is that going to attract them? And so I was just thinking about all my relationships, like my husband, like, what's that thing that is going to like totally make him, see my heart? Is that going to be attractive? Heck yeah. Right? I think about my relationships with my clients. Is that going to be attractive when I say, gosh, this, I'm not perfect? Yeah. Like, so I'm thinking about those most important client relationships. And then just thinking about relationships like with people that I want to attract? Like, what is that vulnerability that, maybe I could share that is going to create a space where we can have a deeper connection? So I wasn't really thinking about particular people, but different roles.
Yeah.
Angela, how about you?
Well, Cami knows where I'm going with it. I mean, I really need to have a conversation with my dad eventually.
Yes.
That's just going to have to happen for me.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard, but it'll be needed and it will be good.
Yeah.
And I mean, I did recently actually have a conversation with my current boss about, and I didn't mention this to you, Cami, but about my pay.
Mm-hmm.
And, I stood up for myself and I said that this is what I'm worth. And I know I went on with you signing up that I was not, that I would make this much. But so that was a conversation I feel good about.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
You got
I've
vulnerable, right?
Yeah, that I accomplished. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you're bringing this up with your dad, because I think what Sarah is going to share here is going to be so useful for you. It's going to give you some ways to think about having these tough conversations. And I think that, there might be some great notes for you to really play with. So take it on over here, Sarah.
Right. Well, I think that whenever you're going to talk about, having courageous conversations or vulnerable conversations, you just have to move from that place of love, right? And that when I love myself enough to address it, then, man, that's a beautiful thing. And then when I express how I'm feeling to other people, that lets them know that I love them, because I'm not just assuming that they can't handle it, or assuming that they're going to react in a particular way, or assuming that they won't care or whatever. I just am really moving from that place of, I love you, I love myself, and love looks like having conversations that matter. And so when you think about those relationships and those conversations that are tough, especially with parents, because you have such history and all sorts of complexities, we just have to recognize that A, it's not going to be easy, and B, that we can totally do it. If we can have that 20 seconds of courage to start the conversation, because that can sometimes be the hardest thing, right? And waiting for all of the perfect conditions to come about, that's probably not going to happen. So you just have to do it. Right? And when you do that, take it upon yourself to be vulnerable in these conversations. It really is a great demonstration of your maturity, to be quite honest. And, if you look at the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, there's this maturity continuum, right? And the lowest level of maturity is dependence, right? I need you. And it's this, I can't survive unless there's you. And so it's just take. And then people move to dependence, right? Where I can do my own thing, right? And a lot of people declare that as the form of maturity. I moved out, I don't need help on the job anymore. I'm not the newbie, so I can do things dependently. Woo! But that's not the highest, right? The highest level is interdependence, where we are working synergistically together. And if we want to reach that highest level of maturity, then it requires us to have really, really great vulnerability and trust within one another. And so if you really want to live in that space of highest effectiveness, to live in truth, to heal all of that past stuff that happens to us, because we all have that, right? If you really want to live in true joy, you have to move past that discomfort, right, of having that piece of that pain that might pop up, right? When you move past that discomfort and address the issues, when you know that it might not be all rainbows and cherries, that means that you are totally being a major epic person, right? So how do we make it easier? Well, I like to think of it in terms of the customer performer model. And if you've never heard of the customer performer model, I hope that you like it as much as I do, because it's all about the fact that in relationship with people, when we love on other people, sometimes we're serving and sometimes we are receiving. Sometimes we are the customer who's making a request, and sometimes we're the provider of the service. And so when we look at it from a service perspective, it's I can make requests, I can make offers, I can be of service, I can sit back and listen, and it's really fun. So in this kind of an interaction, when we know we have to have a courageous conversation, we are the performer, right? And our person that we need to talk to is our customer, right? And so if we can think of it in that term, my customer, I'm here to serve them. How can I set this up for the most amazing, epic levels of success? You just have to follow a couple of steps. And so on your screen, you see some boxes, and we're going to step through each of those pieces. And so take a couple of notes as you listen and kind of say, if I were to create an action plan to have a vulnerable conversation, these would be the pieces that really stand out most. And so I think the first one is the most important, and this is where you declare your intentions. And this is something that you do before that other person is even sitting in front of you or on the phone with you. And you're like, okay, what is it that I really wanted to accomplish with this call? Is it that I want feedback? Is it just that I want to be able to share my intentions? Is it what? Like, what is the main point that I hope this person walks away from? And that, again, is really connected to that service heart piece, right? How do you want them to feel as a result of this conversation? How do you want to feel during this conversation, at the end of this conversation, right? So it's getting that journal out and really spending some time with, that beginning with the end in mind piece, right? What is it that I want? What's my clarity of vision? What are the intentions I'm going to declare, right? And then you think about what's the best way to set this up, right? Once you're clear on the intention, you can start thinking of, okay, where's the right place to have this conversation? Is it over the phone? Sometimes that might be the only option, especially when people aren't in the same state as you, and that's cool. Is it something that you want to do via Zoom or video so you can see somebody's face if you can't see them in person? Is there, is it in the office, outside the office? Just where's the best place? And here you're going to listen to your heart, right? You're going to listen to your intuition, and you're going to go with whatever comes up as you ponder that question. Then it's that matter of when. Like, you think of yourself, like, when do I feel most equipped to have this conversation? Is it in the morning? Is it in the evening? Is it the beginning of the week, the end of the week, at a certain time of the year? Looking good? Is there an event coming up? What have you? So when do you want to weave that into that intention? And then the next piece is really, really, really important, and this is the how, right? What is this conversation going to sound like? But also, like, physically. One of the things that I love about Brené Brown is when she talks about vulnerability, she talks about sitting next to somebody versus across from somebody. And, I remember when we were giving employee performance reviews, that was always a really important piece for me. Like, we're going to have a vulnerable conversation, talk about your performance, right? I don't want it to be that I'm the boss and you're the employee, right? It was always nice to come and sit alongside somebody. So you can think about that in your intention making as well. How do I really want to have this conversation? And then that second piece, that orange box, is really, really critical, right? It's a checking for willingness. So you've laid all the best intentions out, right? And you might even say, to this person, I would like to schedule a conversation, or I'd like to have a conversation with you so that I can talk about X, right? And they say, okay. And then you check for willingness, right? Some people might say, I don't want to have that conversation right now, right? You think about my dad, like, we're going to have a conversation about, like, what happens, when his cancer comes back. Like, he might not be in a place where we want to talk about that right now. And so I want to say, Dad, I'd like to talk about these things. What do you think? Is this something that we can do right now? He says, yep, Sarah, let's do it. What are your plans? How do you want it to go down? Or he can say, hell no, like, I don't want to even go there right now. But you've got to have that door opened. And that happens by you just asking that simple question and not just assuming that that person is ready or willing to do that right now. And I think we skip this sometimes. And so I thought it was important that we insert this here. So after you know what you're doing, you've gotten that other person to agree that, yep, this is the time and the place that we're going to have the conversation, then you can open up that dialogue and offer an assessment. And this assessment doesn't have to be anything other than, this is what I'm feeling, right? And I'm is the really key word, or those I statements, right? It's that I'm feeling like, when I think about our relationship, I'm feeling like there's some rubs. I'm feeling like there's an opportunity for us to up level. I'm feeling like whatever it is that you're feeling, I love to start by just laying my heart on the frickin' floor with that. Here's what my assessment is, right? There's no need to kind of pussyfoot around it. It's just diving in. Last week I had a phone call with one of my clients, the global roundtable that I work for, and I was talking to a producer, and I needed to call her like a month before we actually got on the phone. And so I had, set the time to talk to her, check for willingness to have the conversation, and I opened it up with, oh my God, I just have to tell you that I'm feeling like a complete jerk because I've been ignoring you for the past 4 weeks. And you've probably been wondering where I've been. Right? And she was like, I'm so glad that you started with that. And you included there because I want you to know that it's okay. And so I was able to set aside my like, angst of feeling bad about not reaching out because I just laid it out right from the beginning. And then we moved in and finished, the conversation. But I say offer that assessment. And an assessment this is a really important part and something that I want you to make a note. Your assessment is neither true nor false, right nor wrong. And so as you're sharing that assessment, you can move with that intention. Right? Your assessment is neither true nor false, right nor wrong. It is just an assessment. Right? And that other person that you're talking to has an assessment also. And if you go in with the idea of my assessment's the only thing that matters, then you know how it's likely going to go for you, right? But if you can just go in with that open-mindedness of like, I just want to share what my truth is, right? I'm not saying that I'm the world's, greatest. I'm not saying that I'm right, you're wrong. I'm just laying this out. That just has a different energy to it. So you just remember that an assessment is an assessment. You share your thoughts, right? You lay it out, and then you stop talking, right? And this is just the listening piece and putting those huge listening ears on. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. Then once you've had the chance to have some dialogue, right? You've set the stage, you've listened, you've probably unfolded some more things after that. It's the time to say, so what, now what? Right? As a result of this conversation, what's the offer that you're willing to make to this person? Right? Or on the other side, what requests do you have of them in the future? Right? It could be around how you're going to work together. What are the systems that you're going to use? It could be, hey, we're going to just, go and sit on this, and then we're going to follow up later, once you've had a chance to marinate on it. That's my request. Like whatever those requests or offers are yours. Right? And you get really clear on what those conditions of satisfaction are, and you agree to them. Say, here's what the offers are. The other person might say, go to hell. I don't like those terms. Or they might say, hey, there's another thing I want to add to the table, right? And you come up with something that you can both agree on. Then you make sure that you love those conditions of satisfaction. And then, of course, the thing that we most often skip is that we don't ever follow up. Right? And if that relationship really matters, if you truly want to be vulnerable, then you have to, follow up a week later, 2 weeks later, whatever that is, and say, all right, are we doing better? Are we meeting each other's conditions of satisfaction? What can we do to love on each other some more? So a couple of additional thoughts with this, and then I'd love to open it up for some dialogue. As you're having the language part of your conversation, right, you're offering your assessment, we have already talked about the importance of I, right? And one of the coolest things, I had a client that was staying with me for a couple of days last week, and she was like, one of my favorite ways to approach things with my husbands, or my husbands, I didn't mean to say that, my husband or my clients, she said, is a simple, I've noticed this about our situation, or I've noticed this about you, or I've noticed this about us, and so just, and I've noticed is really easy way to open the dialogue. I see these things, I hear these things, I feel these things. Those are all really cool. And then the open-ended questions that you ask once you're done, sharing your assessment are really simple, right? So what are your thoughts about what I just shared? Or tell me how you feel about this situation, right? We sometimes forget these simple questions that can totally open the dialogue to a more vulnerable level. You can really pull something out to work with then. So think about that language, those phrases that really work well for you. And then as you consider your listening skills, just want to make sure or ask you to give yourself some time this month in August to relearn empathic listening, right? And we've talked about this in previous jams, but just remember the value of showing somebody that you totally heard them, right? And this definitely shows vulnerability because you actually have to summarize what the hell it is that they just said and why they feel that way. You might get it wrong. And you might open yourself up for somebody to say, no way, that's not what I said. And that might hurt, but you do it anyway, right? And so there are two statements that I absolutely love. Again, if you're looking for ways to up-level and relearn your empathic listening skills. I love that it's blank when blank, right? And you fill in the emotion and the reason here. So it's frustrating when you feel like I don't care about, what our plan is. Or whatever the conversation's about, somebody feeds back some emotion to you, you can let them know I heard you. My second favorite one is, the fact that it's taken me a long time to respond to your requests makes you feel like it's not important, right? So the fact that blank makes you feel blank Really, really simple ways to show empathic listening. So zero in on the emotions of others and why they're feeling the way that they're feeling, and know that it's one of the fastest ways that you can build trust when you take this time to truly listen deeply. So hopefully in that piece you have, you maybe made a couple of notes about, gosh, here's something that I might try when I'm having that tough conversation that you wrote about earlier. And just know that we can always get better at this, right? We always can up-level the ways in which we're sharing our hearts, right? And cutting through the crap and letting people know that we're not judging, right? We're not here to criticize. We're really, truly here to up-level the relationship. So Cami, what would you add?
I was just kind of reflecting on, Tim is traveling right now, right? He's gone all of the month of August and home for one weekend, and then gone all of the month of September. So it's a wonderful opportunity, because it can be really frustrating to have. It can be hard to have vulnerable conversations with someone over the phone every night, and so it provides a lot of opportunity to play in that, where it's like, make the conversation. Give the conversation opportunity for deeper connection to occur, even if it is over the phone. So that's the piece that kind of came up for me as you were going through that. How about you, Angela? Do you see opportunities for you?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you just reiterated I've learned a lot from my codependency, the use of I feel rather than, just putting it on me. And
Yeah.
so I feel like that's pretty much how my conversation's going to need to go. And it's going to need to go that it's kind of where I want it to be and what I want said, and know that that's okay. And my truth is my truth. And that's it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So true. And like, we can second guess that. It's like, well, no, maybe I shouldn't be feeling this way. It's like, no, if I feel it, then there's a freaking reason.
Yeah.
And I was gifted with that feeling for a reason.
No doubt,
right?
Right?
The fact that I can feel it is a big thing that I need to do something with. So
Right.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is great. It's right. Vulnerability looks like taking off that mask of, this mask of protection, this mask, it's opening up to our truth. It's opening up to the courage within us. So it's such a beautiful thing to be able to play in this and move through this. So it's a great gift. Okay. So now third column, we've done our, the changes we want to make. We've done the self, the conversation, the vulnerable conversations we want to have with self. We did the vulnerable conversations we want to have in relationship. Now we are going to do the third column, vulnerability and community. And what are the vulnerable conversations you need to have to help move the needle on the changes you want to make in your life? And this is often about creating connection, that know, love, and trust with the communities that we want to touch and evolve. So it might be, memberships that we are part of. It might be clients that we're part of. It might be new clients we're trying to bring into a business. This is about the community and creating a way that, because if we approach those with this wall up, we don't create a real, true, meaningful conversation or connection. And it can be on social media. It might be on the stage. When you get on the stage to speak to a room of people, you want that connection. So what are the stories you want to share with your community or your communities? And not all communities are created equal, right? I mean, some communities you're going to open up into, I know, for example, I'll share one. In the jam sessions, we talked about sensuality and sexuality a few months ago. I'm not going out with that talk to all of, Facebook to see. This was a very vulnerable conversation that we opened up to in a circle where I felt like there was this ability to have some meaningful conversation on it. It's not really relevant for the overarching part of my brand for the whole world to see. some communities we're going to share a lot more, we're going to open our hearts a lot more, and there's going to be some things that we share with the world that really are spot on to what we are wanting to accomplish, what we're wanting to do. And so it doesn't mean that you don't tell stories that aren't scary to tell. I know when I was creating my story, my signature story that I tell from the stage about losing my job, that was not something that I wanted to get up and tell a room full of people. It made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. And it's a core part of it was a core part of my journey. I often read a poem that I wrote to my dad when he died on the stage. It's opening up my heart in a big sort of way. So there's things that we can tell and we can connect with our audience, and it's looking for how does it connect back to the message, what we stand for, our big why that we're delivering in the world, and how we want to connect and communicate with people. How about you, Sarah? What are some examples that are stories for you that are community stories that feel a little bit scary to share?
I definitely think some in relationship, right? When I got divorced when I was, a baby, to when I was in a really crazy relationship, because for a long time I've struggled with that, because okay, how are people going to judge, that she's supposed to be have her shit together as a coach. How could she have some crappy relationships? And so I that's one, sometimes I'll go into detail about the relationship if my relationship with client is close, but it's not something that I share, at a really detailed level on Facebook or, Twitter. That may shift in the future, perhaps, but for right now, I know that there's different layers that I'm willing to unlock based on the closeness of that relationship.
I saw something the other day about talking about when we are going through big vulnerable stories and we are deep into our stuff, we may not be sharing that to the whole world to see. And and then afterwards, after we've gone through that, it may be a story that becomes really important for us to be telling. And I just love that reflection of that, because it was just okay, so if there's something I'm caught up in, I don't need to go deep into that right now. Learn what I'm going to learn from it, and really make the space for me to be vulnerable in that space. Learn for me to understand what emotions, because it's hard to even put emotions to it sometimes when you're in the midst of it all, when it's all messy and ugly. It's hard to really put your finger on, this is what I'm supposed to be learning, and it's not until afterwards that we start to really feel that.
Exactly.
I don't even remember where I saw that. It was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's that good recognition that vulnerability doesn't have to look like I spill my guts to everyone, everywhere, at any time, about anything. No, you always have that choice of what you're going to do, and you're going to just move again from that inside out perspective. So yeah, and it's going to shift and change and have fun and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And that's the cool thing about vulnerability, is it looks so many different ways.
Right.
So I love this question.
Yeah. So let's go on then, and let's start to, so if get those, go ahead and make sure you take time to write those down, but I'm going to keep us going just in honor of time here today.
Absolutely.
And I want you to today you're being called to really consider your truth and how you're shining it out into the world. You're being asked to get really connected to your why, your desires and your values and your goals, and determine how much you're really putting yourself out there to make the change that you really want to have in your life. And I think it's really important, because if you want that change to happen, there's going to be some vulnerability for you. So you go back to your why, you go back to the change you want to create. There is vulnerability there, I can promise you. And you may have to move through it in different stages, and you probably will move through it in different stages. And you're being asked to assess how vulnerability can help you double down on the results that you want to put out in the world. Because and when you share it with the whole world, no matter the situation, your power roars. There's this whole, when you start to own that vulnerability, it really comes out. So consider this question on the screen. Are you willing to bear your truth, even though you'll be judged and you aren't guaranteed a win? Because none of us are guaranteed a win in anything that we're we're stepping out into. I think that's a really important thing. And that's sometimes what holds us back. We keep our truth hidden. We silence our fears because we don't want to appear dumb or silly or too just out there. It's like sometimes I get into some kind of woo-woo stuff. And it's like, do I really want to put this out there? No, hell yeah, own that, because it's part of who I am. And other times we wave our weird flags widely and, on our own brand of badassery, as Sarah would say. And it's this dance, and we get to learn to play in that. And it's, I'm kind of about into this dancing thing today, as you know, Angela. So.
Oh, yeah. Mind, body, spirit, all connected. Yeah, and I love the whole just topic of vulnerability, because it does look like so many different things. And so on your screen, you can see a couple of ideas, right? Vulnerability looks like being you, right? No matter what that looks like for you. It is like you just did in admitting fear, right? What are those things that make you have that fear, whether it's rational or irrational? Like, what is it, right? It's that willingness to be wrong, right? I'm sharing my assessment and it might not be right, but I'm putting it out there anyway. It's knowing who you are and also knowing who you're not, right? Because that's almost as important. So consider if there's anything there that's popping up for you as you consider how you define vulnerability. And we'll add just a few more to this list, right? Vulnerability looks like apologizing, right? If you have to say, I know I was wrong, or I did something wrong or something like that, you could just decide to, I want to sweep it under the rug, or you can decide, I'm going to just like go forth and apologize, own it. Right? That takes massive amounts of vulnerability, right? And then the getting naked one makes me chuckle, right? Because it definitely is a physical thing, right? That, just think about that first time you get naked in front of somebody else. You're like, oh, here I am, stretch marks and dimples and everything. What do you think? Right? They could be like, oh shit. But then it's also like getting naked in terms of like your emotions, right? And just sharing that rawness and realness of who you are, that transparency. So what does getting naked look like for you right now? Where do you need to get naked? Something maybe to play in. Feedback that's direct is one of my favorite parts of vulnerability. And, sometimes, not trying to, like I said before, like put all that fluff around it. That's not helpful, but like, let's just be direct and to the point, right? It's not to be mean or ill intention, right? It's always, let's talk about the real issue at hand. That can be vulnerability. Revealing your heart, right? Knowing that it might not be received back, that's vulnerability.
Remember the first time you said I love you to somebody, right?
Are they going to say it back? Or are they going to look at you?
What if they don't?
Thanks for that.
Yeah. And here's some more. It's like that 3 a.m. version of you. It's like when you wake up and you go, oh my God, this is coming out, and do I dare share this with somebody? It's about taking the armor off. It's about opening up your heart and saying, you know what? Guess what? I'm going to share with you what scares the hell out of me. It's about saying yes. It's about saying yes to sometimes yourself. Yes to something that feels a little bit like, can I actually accomplish this? It's about owning your truth. And it's about the willingness to sound dumb. One of my podcasts that I did last week, I love this statistic. And this is an important one for you to kind of play with, Sarah, as a mama of young ones. Kids that are your kids' age, so the young, 5 and under kind, moms field 100,000 questions a year. Yeah, you feel that?
Amen.
Yeah. And by the time kids hit middle school, it's almost extinct. They quit asking questions. And so that willingness to sound dumb, to ask questions, to be curious about things that's vulnerable. And not to know all the answers can be really, really powerful. So, a great lesson in those with little kids, keep encouraging that curiosity, even when they move into to middle school ages. And for us to say, how do we engage that again? How do we open that up? Because it's incredibly powerful. So let's talk a little bit about what vulnerability is not. It is not a thing just for the ladies. Men can certainly be vulnerable. I mean, let's open up the conversation. Let our men be vulnerable in these conversations. it's not about just crying in front of somebody. It's not about, just for the sake of crying to connect. It doesn't mean you can't cry. If those tears are there and they're real, but it's not a place. It's certainly not a license to be an asshole, right? It's done out of love, and it's not about shaming or blaming or criticizing. It's not about a small talk with a stranger. It's about connection, right? Meaningful conversations. It's not about projecting all of our stuff out to the world for shock's sake. It's about connecting to your big why. There has to go back to that big why, that connection, why you want to share that. And I think that piece one just gets to me, because I see so much projecting out there right now. It's just contributing to the noise, and it's like, what the hell's their why for sharing that? What are they wanting to get to? So I get passionate. I get kind of wrapped up on that one.
Right.
So vulnerability. Why vulnerability? Now that we've connected to what vulnerability is and what it's not, let's talk about the massive benefits of expanding the presence of vulnerability in our lives. And these are things you know. And today I really want you to consider these with new eyes. Ask what you need more of in your life. So read this list and ask, just really go through this. Read this list real quickly. Which of these things do you want? What stands out to you? What do you want to attract more of in your life?
And here's some more gorgeous ones to look at.
Right?
And that third bullet there is something that is cited quite frequently from people who have been vulnerable, right? They just feel that freedom. They feel that lift off of the shoulder, right? We talk about the weight of like holding our truth in can feel like, but when I can put that truth out there, like that feeling of freedom that accompanies that can be really, really powerful. And the final one there I want you to consider too, that it can bring accountability, right? When you share your truth, that realness out there, you've put it out there for somebody then to follow up with you, right? And so that creates some massive accountability, which you may really be craving right now in your life. It can be really, really cool. So notice just on that list of these two slides, like what do you really need more of, right, in your life? And vulnerability can be the answer for that. So how cool.
Yeah.
Right? We just get to be us, like, and know that we were like perfectly created, and that we can do whatever we need to do to make, a life that we really love. And we've shared lots of examples of what vulnerability looks like. And I would just love to hear, and open it up. Like, what does it really look like for you? As we've been talking about definitions of vulnerability, or, just things that, it can bring us in terms of benefits. Just what do you think about vulnerability? So Angela, any thoughts that you could share with us? Like what's big for you now that we've kind of gone through this big sweeping conversation?
Well, for me, I guess vulnerability means opening up myself to find out, to help someone else be able to relate, or have them be able to open up and speak to about something that they might not want to share about. So many people hold stuff in.
Right.
And I used to do that a lot. I used to not say anything to anyone about anything. But now I kind of I share. I've been known to share too much. Now I'm kind of limiting it. But I think it helps others connect with you and open up themselves.
Yeah, it totally could create freedom for other people, right? And with the servant heart that you have this caring servant heart. If you could even put it on in the idea that it's opening up things in their life, it's changing things in their life, making their lives better.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that. And these last journal questions, I think, are going to tie directly to what you just said. And so this is your last, I guess, request from us. As you carry this thought of, How can I show more vulnerability in my life? Take it out in the pages of your journal. Oh, Cassie just ran up here and says, hi, yes. So what are 2 ways that you want to demonstrate vulnerability in the future, with people or situations? Then go, it's okay. We're learning potty training. He's got to go.
Go ahead.
By all means. What do you need to ask for help with? That is a huge vulnerability. So whatever that is, what are some areas that you might need some help with?
That's what we don't ask for very often, right? It's like, oh God, I have to ask for help.
Right, and then that shows massive vulnerability because I'm not smart enough, or I'm not capable enough, or I'm not able to fit it all in. I mean, there's all this self-judge stuff that comes in, right? Yeah. So to be asking for help is huge vulnerability. And then that final one goes back to what you were just sharing, Angela, is how do I create space for others to be vulnerable around me? How do I open that up for them so that I can create some transformation? So pick one of those questions, maybe all of them, to journal on over the next couple of days. And again, where your attention goes, your energy flows. If you start thinking about vulnerability more frequently, you're going to show up with more vulnerability in your life.
Yeah, and I'll post these journal questions on the Facebook group when I post this, so that everybody has quick access to them. You can grab it there, Angela.
Great.
Okay.
And we've already talked about Brene Brown. If you haven't read her book, definitely get it. It's just a not to be missed book, and not to be missed videos that she has out there.
Yes, I listened to the Daring Greatly on audio book, and it was really a great one. So something to consider if you don't have time. Do it while you drive. And then join us again. Next month, we'll be talking about mindset. And vulnerability and mindset are like BFFs, baby. So it's going to be great. We're going to love it.
Yep. Well, Angela, thank you for being so vulnerable today, being the only one on the call, with everybody else going to be joining in on the recording. So thank you. We really appreciate that. And thank you to all of you who are catching this on the flip side, listening to the recording. And let us know on Facebook how, what came up for you, what we are going to be watching to hear from you guys. So do some posting out there when we get this out there.
Yes. Tell us what's your definition of vulnerability. That would be really cool to hear.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Angela. Bye, Sarah.
Thanks, Angela.